Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining WRDC's Career Connections Fisheries Edition. I'm Stephanie Rowe Slaney, WRDC's Outreach and Engagement Coordinator, and I'll be facilitating today's event. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues, Cara Howell and Jen Cheeks, who have been instrumental in coordinating this event. So thank you, Cara. You're behind the scenes, and thank you so much for doing the tech side of things. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk and the island of Newfoundland and Labrador as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. We would like to recognize the Innu and Inuit and their ancestors as the original peoples of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. So we'll just take a moment to think about that. Before starting, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items for the event. There is a space for everyone to have a voice. We encourage you to be active in the chat throughout the session. This is a journey. We're all in different places. We all have lived experiences and value to add to the discussion. And respect is the foundation, even if we have different beliefs and values. Language is consistently changing, so we do our best to keep up. We will be having a Q&A period at the end of the event. And if you have any questions throughout the event, please put them in the Q&A tab. Just a little overview of WRDC. Women in Resource Development Corporation, or WRDC, is a provincial nonprofit organization committed to increasing women's participation in technology and skilled trades. For over 25 years now, we've been changing the culture of work in the industries that have been historically less accessible for women. Our definition of women, women refers to anyone who identifies as a woman and explicitly includes not only cis women, but also trans women, anyone who identifies as non-binary, non-conforming, or gender fluid, and anyone irrespective of assigned gender at birth, gender identity, and gender expression who has experienced or is subject to experiencing discrimination based on identifying as a woman and/or being identified by others as a woman. Girls have a similar definition, with age being the only distinguishing difference between the two. So again, welcome to our Career Connections Fishery editions. We're very, very excited to have our guest speakers today. I'd like to sincerely thank our guests, Kimberly Orren and Jennifer Pittman, for sharing their knowledge and expertise in the fisheries industry. So very, very excited to hear what you have to share with us today. So a little background in Kimberly Orren. She is the executive director and co-founder of Fishing for Success, a nonprofit organization to teach youth and their families and visitors about the intangible cultural heritage of Newfoundland and Labrador's family history. The programs advocate for an inclusive, gender equitable, and sustainable small-scale fishery that can help combat climate change and contribute to food sovereignty through better coastal seafood access. Just a note that Kimberly was recently the recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal for her tireless work and persistence to inspire a more sustainable fishery. So congratulations on that award, Kimberly, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Happy to be here today. I hope everyone is at home, snuggled up in pajamas and a cup of tea. Very much looking forward to all the women today who might have some great questions, and always happy to get more folks in the boat. So I'm going to do that. We joked about this earlier today about sharing. So I'm going to try that sharing thing, and let's see if I can do that without looking too silly for a minute here. So I'll get this PowerPoint set up here for you and show you a couple of pictures while I chat about what you're looking at. So of course, Fishing for Success, as you just heard, is a nonprofit social enterprise that works to introduce youth, families, and those who have been, and can you see that yet, Stephanie, or have I not clicked the share button yet?
I can't see it from my end. We'll just double check with Kara on our tech side.
Okay, no, not yet.
No, can't see it yet. Just click on the share button.
Yeah, no, I see what I did. Hang on 1 second. I'm trying to get it into screen mode, and it's going to take a second. You can tell I'm rusty doing the online ones. But while I get that set up, so as we're trying to teach young people about their fishing heritage, you find out that there's an issue about women and girls in particular. If you stand around your community's boat ramp, you'll find that the dads still are overwhelmingly taking out buys with them. You know, they're not oftentimes taking out their daughters. So we still have a generational gap there in taking women in the boat, even if it's dads taking daughters out. So starting a Girls Who Fish program became really important for us if we were going to start talking about getting more people in the boat. So I think you see it now. Right, so this is one of our former Girls Who Fish members. She's a local artist, Amberlynn Thorne, and so we had a grounded iceberg one year. And so it's amazing to get out and see the dimpled surface of the iceberg. This is one of the most recognizable structures on our property. And so the dory was painted in colors of pride during the first summer of COVID by Liam Duggan, who's one of our Canada Summer Jobs programs youth. And this was suggested by the Canada Summer Job students themselves. And this is literally our mission in a traditional Newfoundland boat. And so this says exactly what we want to do. And so it's in a traditional fishing Newfoundland village on a traditional fishing Newfoundland boat. And it tells us what we're about. So when people drive by, it's right there in the middle of the community. And also thinking about what fishing means to us. This is looking through the lens of a cod eye. So it's really cool to think about this. You can see that it turns the community upside down as you look at the community through the cod lens. So I like to think of fishing as turning your view of the world upside down and around. So we tend to think of fishing today as something that our grandparents do, and they just do it to earn a living. And we just leave the 2% of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to do that. It's their job. They go to work, they come home, they're done, and we shouldn't be worried about it. But we should be worried about it because it has a lot of impact on what's happening on the ocean. It has impact on our food security and sovereignty, national security even. And it's important to think about with climate change. And we should be getting every young person as much as we can involved in what's happening on the surface of the ocean and within the ocean. And we should encourage every kid to get in the boat. So thinking about fishing in a different way is really important. So, you know, I think about it this way. This is me. And you can see how long ago it was. This was the old internet. It was a handwritten letter when I was 9 years old. And so I was so excited by catching my first fish. And this was outside of Gander. And this was a mud trout. And I wrote a letter to my grandfather. And it meant so much to him that after he passed away and we were going through my grandfather's things, we found this tucked away in his Bible by his bedside. And so of all the things he could have kept in his Bible, you know, pictures of him and his World War II buddies, or a picture of his bride, or he kept a picture of me and my first fish in the letter that I wrote about it. So when we think about our experiences growing up, oftentimes they're experiences of us going fishing with our grandparents or taking our children fishing. So thinking about fishing in a different way is really important because sometimes they're so deeply embedded in who we are that we sort of don't think about them. And that, I think, has become a problem. And I think it's become a funding problem and an educational problem. So when I was a teacher, I was happy as a bug in a rug teaching chemistry and, you know, electron configurations. I thought they were really cool. But, you know, this is what the inside of a classroom looks like, no matter which country you're in. And it doesn't glue young people to place if this is the only place that they're learning within. So getting young people outside is vitally important if we want to keep them in Newfoundland and Labrador, which we can see that over time, we're still continuing to lose young people from Newfoundland and Labrador. So what can we do? So I noticed that when I would take young people outside, like this was the kind of like, wow, I'd get when I took my students outside. I sponsored a deep sea fishing club. I sponsored a scuba diving club. We went dipping for macroinvertebrates in ponds. And like, that was it. That was the bomb. So, this is the thing, right? It's a huge investment for schools to do experiential learning, but just one experiential learning trip a year, the dividends pay off for months. And so teachers who come on Fishing for Success, fishing trips or field trips, will tell you, Holy Heart of Mary, St. Bon's, to name a few, they can tell you that these field trips pay off months after the field trip. So why do we need these things? We know what our young people are dealing with. So let's start giving them a foundation, because all of these things lead into helping them create a sense of identity and a sense of place. And why do they need that today? Because we're all dealing with these great, big, huge, tangly problems. And so we can add more to them, like this upcoming, issue that we're waiting for April 2nd. And that's going to cause a lot of stress on families. So obviously I'm taking a youth slant. This is where career development starts. Research tells us that career development starts as early as age 9, that if we don't start young, we literally could miss the boat. So, pun intended. Thinking about fishing as our shared human heritage, we look at all the different ways that people fish. Leo, our resident old guy, is down there at the bottom middle, pulling in a codfish by hook and line or hand line, which is a traditional sustainable way to fish. We see a mother and a daughter from Newfoundland dropping some capelin that they've just collected by gleaning, and they're dropping it on the ground to dry. And then some very unique international ways to fish. And I keep teasing Leo that I want to see him do that way that those guys in Asia are doing on the poles, but we haven't been able to get him to do that yet. The interesting thing about it is that the experience of fishing is personally transformative, that you never know what a young person is going to do with it. All you know is that it's going to be deeply moving. So Natalie Panic is a scientist with Canada's Space Association, and she works on Canada's Space Arm. So she says how she got started interested in science was by fishing, which is very much my story. So on her Twitter account, she says how it got started and how it's going. So we don't know where young people go after we get them out fishing or get them in the boat. So the investment pays off. So this is basically Fishing for Success vision in a very long nutshell. We need to get every child in the boat. So we had a youth cod fishery. They learned how to repair the boats. They had to climb down over a 10-foot stagehead into the boat that they just repaired. And so they had their PFDs on, they had a baler in the boat. Leo's down there, the young girl getting in the boat is kind of blocking. You see Leo a little bit down there trying to help her in. The young man down in the boat is like this, afraid to move because dories are very tippy. And he said, should I worry? And I said, no, you did a great job repairing the dory, right? And he said, oh, I don't know. And I said, well, there's a baler, you have a PDF on, the water's shallow. If anything happens and you fall in the water, you're prepared. Leo's right there. The worst thing that'll happen is you get wet. And so training kids to identify dangers and mitigate the risk is really vital, because as a province, we're asking young people to be entrepreneurs, to be leaders in the Arctic Gateway. And all of that means taking risks. And so if we don't start young and helping them to identify dangers and take cautions and then mitigate those risks, then we're falling short of our responsibilities. So the cool thing about the program was at the end of the summer, the young people, of course, would learn how to fish. They learn how to process the fish, and they take it home to their families. And so young people participating in this program oftentimes were those whose families might have been dependent on food banks. So bringing home fresh fish was very meaningful. We had a graduation ceremony for them, and they received golden jiggers, which basically was a cod jigger, traditional cod jigger, spray painted gold for them. And it was really a great ceremony. Parents and social workers were crying, and Leo was crying, and we had a great fun. And we saw them again next year and started all over again. So we had a lot of fun. But thinking about women, because this is why we're here today and why women should be getting in the boat. This was put out in 2021 by women in the seafood industry. And you can see where the concentration of women are, and we're in activism. We advocate for things, and then we're on the floor of this seafood plant. That very much goes back to a lot of the history of our grandmothers in Newfoundland and Labrador who were on the fish plant floor, or before even that, on the fish flake. And so we haven't moved too much beyond that. Trying to get women into the boat and into positions of meaningful policy and leadership roles is still very much a challenge, even though lately we see that the government has had Minister of Fisheries. We need more. So we need greater push up that level into professional organizational leadership and fisheries management roles. So that's the push, is to get women into the boat and then into the boardroom. So that's what that means. It's, if you go fishing with your dad, oftentimes dad is going to, put the bait on the hook, take the fish off. And like, that's all the fun, right? So in the Girls Who Fish program, make the point of very quickly not doing that work, because we've got a boatload of girls and women on the boat, and we don't want to do the work for you, because like we know that's the fun. So it's like we're constantly telling Leo to get away, leave us alone. You're just here to, make sure we've got squid and let's keep fishing. So we want the women in the boat to take the lead as much as possible. And we joke that as soon as we know what we're at, we're throwing Leo out. So, but we loved Leo because we can't do things without the men in the community. Although Nicole Power, she's great. She just tells us we just need to push the men out of the way. But no one is a island unto themselves. So what does it look like to empower women to move from the shore to the boat and to the boardroom? So this is where organizations like WRDC are important to provide support for women, and then other like-minded nonprofits to work together. So what Fishing for Success does with programs like Girls Who Fish is the Girls Who Fish members actually serve as volunteers to work with other nonprofits. So for example, when we put out the call, hey, we're going to start a Girls Who Fish program, the women who ended up answering the call looked very much like me. They were white, they were college educated, and like that wasn't just what I was aiming to do in the boat. And because, if you want to tackle climate change and food sovereignty issues, you needed to have a greater inclusion and variety of folks in the boat with greater lived experience if you really wanted to have creative solutions to getting women. So how do we make this accessible for people? Well, Fishing for Success is a bootstrap nonprofit. So we don't have money to provide transportation. One of the first barriers to access to nature is transportation. Petty Harbour doesn't have public transportation. So we partner with other nonprofits who, feel the same way about fishing that we do. So Association for New Canadians, First Light, Choices for Youth, YMCA, So all of these organizations partner with us, and we work together to provide these experiences for those folks. And so some of the folks that you see in these slides are organizations and their programs working together with us. So this is a First Light women's group out fishing with us, ice fishing. One winter when we actually had ice on the ponds long enough so we could go ice fishing, the group down in the bottom is, and Leo's hiding behind the house there. He let the women take over the boat while he was kind of hiding just in case. And I'm in the bow. I'm also a captain, have a captain's ticket, but we wanted them to feel what it was like to control the boat. They had a great time. Hopefully no one called us in for doing donuts in the harbor. But they had so much fun squealing. The only one who got seasick was our Newfoundlander right there, standing up, laughing by the house there. We did a From Boats to Bowls pilot program with Choices for Youth, where the Mama Moments worked with Mallard Cottage to develop a recipe for the bits and parts left over from fish offal to make, check my time here, to make fish broth, because they wanted to develop a social enterprise based on using some of the leftover fish parts. This was the WISH program with the Association for New Canadians, where we had women that were brought over in a special program by the Canadian government. And so we provided them with this once a week program for 3 months. And this was identified as a best practices program by CAMH. This was a program that we did with a youth panel on the cod fishery in 2017 at the hall after the cutting movie was shown. And we, who has a youth cod panel and actually asks young people what they want for a future fishery. That's never been done. It's never been done since. We're always asking the old people what they want. And I'm not going to be around, in another 10 years to be on the boat fishing. Right now, I'm a crew person. And, so it's what we should be asking young people. This is a Girls Who Fish program, and they were trying to develop on their own without looking, a quick and dirty way to get out the otoliths because they want to make jewelry. So they resorted after this to some heavy duty power tools. This was more of that Mallard Cottage program. So going back to some heritage and identity, I've just got some random pictures here, and keeping in mind that this is a shared human heritage, like across the world. So right away, one of the things that Fishing for Success does to earn revenue for this, because it's difficult to get funding to take people out on the North Atlantic in a little boat and give them sharp knives to cut things out. That's kind of like something it's difficult to get funding for, especially for young people. So we provide tourism programs, upcharge them, and use that revenue to reduce the cost or provide it free. And the first thing you can do from someone, no matter where in the world they're from, is they've got fishing stories. So you can bond right away. You can link it to UNESCO, so UN, and those SDGs that we're talking about trying to link. And let's see, I think, oh, one more. Art. One of the things that, especially young people, we introduced this. Now it's going to click through like 10 million things because I got impatient. But, one of the things that we introduced to try to, throw every kind of pizza cheese at the wall so that everyone who came through the program found something they connected with, is an art project where when you catch your first fish, you put paint on the fish and take an impression of the fish. And you keep that, so there's no lying about how big your fish is. So this is Phil, and he takes home his impression of Phil, and of course the bag is fillets of Phil. So these kids, when they went fishing, they named every fish that came over the boat. So every 15 fish had a name for each fish. So so these kids, who knows what they're going to become when they grow up, but that was their experience. So these little guys went fishing. there's also a seal culture that's attached to fishing that sometimes we sort of hide and put aside, but it's also important to culture, especially culture to indigenous and to food. And we've been working on trying to advocate for getting that on the food menu. And thank you very much. And there's all my contact information.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. That's fascinating work and inspiring work. I can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing in the community. What really resonated was, it starts with our youth. That career development, that foundation starts at a very young age, and it's programs like Fishing for Success and STEM for Girls with WRDC that's very empowering for young people. But giving them that experiential learning opportunity is just an invaluable opportunity. So thank you.
Well, while you're thanking me, I just want to say I appreciate that, but I'm very blessed to do this because when I'm in the boat with them or on land helping them, I just feel very blessed to be there in the moment, sharing these experiences with them. So I appreciate that, but I want to let you know that it's a blast for me. So yeah.
Well, that's great because that's what makes it even more meaningful and more powerful when you have that investment. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Okay, and next we have Jennifer Pittman. This is a good segue because Jennifer Pittman is one of our WRDC STEM for Girl role models. She's also a marine biologist. She has a master's of marine studies in fisheries resource management from the Marine Institute and a Bachelor of Science in Ocean Sciences from Memorial University. She started her career as a fisheries observer and was one of 2 female observers in the province. She now works as a marine biologist at WSP. Jennifer's work on the marine sciences team consists of a mix of fieldwork, in-office report writing, research, and data analysis. She's a certified marine mammal observer and seabird observer and has the opportunity to partake in various fisheries surveys for DFO, ExxonMobil, as well as fishing recreationally herself. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today to share your expertise, and thank you for being a STEM for Girls role model.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to share my screen as well, and I have some photos while I talk. Alrighty. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty. So thank you for the great introduction. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my career journey, the education path that I took, and the jobs that I've worked, just to give people looking for a career in fisheries an idea of things that they could do, paths they could take, or maybe things that they know they don't want to do, because that's important to figure out as well. So I started my Bachelor of Science degree right out of high school. I decided to major in ocean sciences because I knew I wanted to do something to do with the fishing industry, but I hadn't really narrowed it down yet. So that's a degree that I chose to do. While I was doing that degree, I started working with Parks Canada. So I worked with them in Grossmore National Park and had the opportunity to work right on the ocean. I worked at the Lobster Cove Head Lighthouse. So I had the opportunity to just talk to tourists about Newfoundland culture, and there was a little exhibit there on fishing as well. So I was able to teach tourists and visitors about the fishing industry, which I found really, really fun and really great to kind of engage different people. Throughout my bachelor's degree, I then got hired as a fisheries observer. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because that was my first full-time job in the fishing industry. And that's something that's a really unique career and that not a lot of people have done and not a lot of women have done. So when I was hired as that, I was one of 2 women observers in the province. And it's something that's a little bit more of a difficult career, but it's very, very rewarding. So I do want to talk about that a little bit. I then went on to do my master's. I did my master's in fisheries resource management. At that point, I had known that I really wanted to focus on making a sustainable fishing industry in the province. I was inspired to do that since a young age. So I grew up in Newfoundland fishing. I was fortunate enough, just like Kimberly, to start fishing at a very young age. I started fishing at probably around 3 years old. And I still do it to this day. Every single summer, I go salmon fishing, I go cod jigging, catch capelin, trout, really anything I can get my hands on, I will be doing it as much as possible. So that's what really inspired me to do to work towards a career in the fishing industry, is because I grew up fishing. I have uncles and family members who are fishermen, and I grew up traveling around the bay and really seeing the fishing communities and seeing how that industry can make such a broad, like a vibrant community, and really inspire people. So then I did my master's in fisheries resource management, and I got my first full-time job as a marine biologist. So I was working at a small consulting industry, and I had a lot of opportunities through there to kind of grow my career. And I got a little bit of experience doing a bit of everything. And I was then certified as a marine mammal observer and a certified seabird observer. That led me to my job now, which is at WSP, which is one of the leading consulting services in Canada. And I'll get into what I do at kind of all of those jobs as well. So as a fisheries observer, as I mentioned, that was kind of my first full-time job in the fishing industry. So I was hired there when I was still doing my undergrad. They hired me full-time. And I actually started living and working on these boats. So these are some fishing vessels that are here in the province. So a fisheries observer goes out on the vessels with the fishermen, and you actually live with them, work with them, and you do basically samples of their catch. So you weigh the catch, you check for diseases, you look at like eggs and things like that. But I was actually living on these boats. So I was traveling around the province. I was working full time. So I would go out for about a week at a time, sometimes less, sometimes more. Basically, however long the fishermen are working for, you're working for that long as well. So that was a really amazing opportunity, but it was also very difficult. So I had no cell service, no Wi-Fi, which is a little bit different in this day and age. And I would go out and be completely isolated from everyone that I knew and just be living with the fishermen. Usually a crew of about 5 people and then the captain and first mate. So it was a small group of people and me, and it would be a different boat every time. So all of these boats that you see on the screen I've worked on, from around about a week to 9 days was the longest one. And it was a really interesting opportunity. So these are the types of things that I'd be doing when I was on these boats. So these are the types of catch. They were all crab fishing vessels and lobster fishing vessels. So, or not lobster, sorry, shrimp. So I'd basically take samples of the catch. This picture of the crab up in the top left corner, that's one sample that I would take. So I'd take a full tote pan of crab and I would weigh them, I would measure them, I would check for any diseases, I would check if any of them were females and if they were carrying eggs. So the middle photo there on the bottom is actually an egg-bearing female. You would want to make sure you're counting and checking the health of any female so you can really assess the population. So all of the data that I took when I was a fisheries observer would be sent to DFO, and then that helps out with their analysis of fish populations, fish health, and the fishing industry in general. So that was a very interesting career. It was also very challenging. So I was, again, one of the only females in the province doing it. And there are definitely some challenges that come with working on a boat and kind of being isolated in that way. I personally absolutely loved it in many, many ways. And I will say that I have never learned more in my life than working on the boats with the fishermen. They are truly just people so full of knowledge, and they're usually so open to kind of telling you their stories and telling you their opinions too on how the fishing industry is going, which is really, really valuable knowledge as well. So that inspired me even more. So I was during my undergrad. So when I started working with this, I was like, I know what I want to do. I want to work towards a sustainable fishing industry in Newfoundland. And really hearing the opinions and the stories of the fishermen really made me kind of even more passionate in that way. So then I moved on from that and I got my first full-time job. So I graduated from my undergrad and I got a full 9-to-5 job at a consulting agency. So this gave me a lot of opportunities. I was able to do a lot of research for the fishing industry. We were hired by DFO, so that's kind of one of the major organizations, of course, in the fishing industries. We were hired by them to do research. I also got out in the field and I was certified as a marine mammal observer and a seabird observer. So that's a little bit different than a fisheries observer. So marine mammal and seabird observers go out usually in offshore environments, mainly in industries like oil and gas. and do a lot of observing for mitigation, environmental mitigation. So I actually then started teaching seabird observation courses and actually certifying people to go offshore. So the top left photo is there, me with a class of people that I had just certified to go offshore. So got them all suited up and ready to go. And then I also got to do a little bit in the corporate world. So this was my first taste at working in a corporate environment. So the bottom left and right photos are me at corporate events. So I was able to present at conferences, attend networking events, attend different presentations, and kind of get a taste of the industry side rather than just the field work. So it was a very different type of a vibe, but it was a really good opportunity to kind of see what I wanted to do and see kind of the opportunities that are out there with other jobs with other people as well. Up the photo of me in the top right there, that's me suited up and ready offshore. So I also got some opportunity to do some offshore work in the oil and gas industry and the fishing industry as well. So that photo is me in a survival suit, all ready to get frogged from a vessel to a oil and gas platform. So if anyone doesn't know what frogging is, they basically hook you up to a giant crane and you are lifted from a vessel to a platform or vice versa. So really cool experience. Terrible if you're scared of heights, but I thankfully am not. So throughout my time with this job, I spent 2.5 years working here. I got to do field work, I got to do research, I got to do corporate events and networking, and really experience different aspects of the fishing industry as well as just the environmental industry as a whole. Through that job, again, I started working offshore a little bit more. So I kind of graduated from the fishing vessels to the large oil and gas vessels, which is a completely different world. So that top vessel there, the green vessel, that's an OCI vessel, and they do fisheries surveys. So that's actually a trawler. And they have the whole facility in the bottom of the boat to process all of the fish on board so they can stay out for a very long period of time. So I would go out and do fisheries surveys for them. So these are for oil and gas industries, and they go out and do fisheries surveys every couple of years as part of the environmental regulations that oil and gas companies have to follow. The middle vessel there, I spent 2 weeks on just this past September. I was doing water sampling and sediment sampling out by the oil rigs. And then the bottom boat there, I spent a week on over this summer, and I was doing marine mammal observing. So there's a lot of different work that goes on offshore. I personally am mostly interested in the fishing aspect of it, of course, but I've had the opportunity to do different stuff as well. And the 2 photos there of the oil rigs, they're photos that I actually took this summer. And it's really cool to experience that. And I personally really enjoyed it and getting to experience all those different things. So the fisheries surveys that I had the opportunity to do, they're groundfish surveys. So these are 2 photos of me actually on a boat, even though it doesn't really look like it, but we set up a lab in the boat, and that's me on the left there actually trying to take a blood sample from a live fish. So that's American plaice, which is a flatfish, and taking a blood sample out of a live fish is a little bit difficult, if you can imagine. So they're flopping around, they don't want to be there, they're out of the water, and you have to take blood samples on a moving boat. So it's a bit of a challenge, but a great one. The photo on the right there is me with another amazing woman in the industry, Alexis Cole, and she is actually filleting the fish there. So she's filleting the fish. We also remove the otoliths, we take out the livers, spleen, gonads, everything. We check for diseases. We basically do everything to these fish and then send the data back to shore. So I had the opportunity to do these types of surveys a few times over the past few years through the company that I was with previously and through the company that I'm with now. And then as I did these offshore surveys, I ended up transitioning to the company that I'm with now, which is called WSP. So now I'm with them. This is some of the stuff that we would deal with when we were offshore. So you can see the giant codfish that we have. We also have lots of different species of crabs and shrimp, and that's an eel pout to the top left corner, a little lumpfish on the bottom right corner. And so doing these fishery surveys was honestly one of my favorite experiences throughout my career so far. I love doing them. They happen every couple of years. And it's just a different experience. So working on the fishing vessels, you see a lot of different fish, a lot of different crabs and stuff as well. And then you go offshore and you do surveys in much deeper water, which with much larger nets and everything, and you see a lot of different stuff. So having those two different opportunities that I've had, I've really learned a lot, and I absolutely love doing this. Would recommend it to anyone if you ever get the opportunity to do any types of surveys. I've also done crab surveys as well for DFO when I was a fisheries observer, and it's something that I really enjoy, is getting out and doing this type of field work. So now I'm with a company called WSP. They're one of the largest consulting firms in Canada. They're also worldwide. And I'm on the marine sciences team. So it's actually an engineering firm. So you wouldn't even think that someone with a fisheries background would end up working there. If you look at their website, you wouldn't see anything to do with fisheries, but they actually have a whole marine team that I'm so grateful to have joined. And this is some of my team members there. There aren't many women on our team either. There's one woman with me as well now, which is really great. But again, it's still a very, very male-dominated field. My work there consists of a lot of field work in the summertime, doing fisheries surveys. We do a lot of terrestrial work as well in ponds and rivers. They do electrofishing surveys. They check for fishless ponds up in Labrador. There's tons of different work in the fishing industry that you wouldn't even know about, just looking at company websites and things like that. I also do a lot of research. So I'm actually publishing an article, my first published piece of work in a couple months, about ocean monitoring in wind farms. So I've had the opportunity to do stuff like that. I've had the opportunity to do research. I spent at least a month or two in Excel workbooks doing data analysis a couple months ago. So there's very much stuff that you do outside of just field work as well. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, talk about the types of settings that I've worked in, the types of jobs that I've done, and even just different companies and stuff that I've worked for. Because when I started in my undergrad, I just assumed that I would graduate and I would get a job with DFO, because that is, of course, fisheries. They go hand in hand here in Newfoundland. And that would be my career. That's what I thought would happen. That was my goal. And that is not what happened at all. I've never worked for DFO. I have done surveys for them, and I have done pieces of work for them in terms of research that they have hired companies I've worked for to write, but I've never worked for them. Yet I've still had so many amazing experiences in the fishing industry. So I just kind of wanted to shed some light on that and talk a little bit about my journey, because I think it's really important to know a little bit more about the options that you have if you're looking to enter the fishing industry. I also think it's really important for people that want to have a job in the fishing industry to consider what they want to do. Do you want to work offshore, or is that something that you have no interest in and you can't imagine being on a boat? Do you want to do research, or do you want to work in a lab, or would you rather be out on a boat? Would you want that 9 to 5, or do you want to work rotations and then have time off? There's so many different aspects of your career that you have control over, and you have so many choices. So please feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm going to put my email in the chat. And again, I am a STEM4Girls mentor. So if anyone has any questions about any of my career path or my education or anything like that, feel free to reach out as well. And thank you for listening.
An incredible career so far, and well, such an inspiration. I think that you're right, and there's often assumptions of what careers look like in the fishery, but you've really opened our mind to all the possibilities for careers in the fishery. There's such a range. And
Yes.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And I think Kimberly and you both mentioned, the importance of learning from one another, and the importance of allyship. So Kimberly mentioned Leo, and you mentioned your colleagues when you're out in the field, and I think that's an important part of all the career development piece of this. So thank you so much for sharing that. Sincere thanks to you both. We're going to move into the career Q&A portion of the session. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A tab. But I did want to ask, what advice would you give to someone? I mean, I know that you're going to put your contact information in the chat, but someone just starting out saying, you know, I am interested in fisheries. What advice would you give them when they're looking to start a career? Like, where should they reach out? What organizations can they reach out to learn more about careers?
I would say there's a lot of different organizations. I think getting involved in the fishing community and the science community in general is probably one of the most beneficial things. If you're someone that's in MUN or the Marine Institute, I think getting involved with your profs, getting involved with the people that work in the labs, even other students is such an amazing resource. It's something I honestly did not do very much of when I was in my undergrad. And I wish that I had, because I think building those connections when you're very young and kind of entering into the industry is really important. But there's also so many events that happen around town. So there's like different organizations like Nature NL, they take interns. There's NLO, which is an organization that helps women entrepreneurs. They have events all the time that are great for networking. And I know there are a few women in the fishing industry in that organization as well, because I've attended their events. And I would also say that if you are someone that wants to work in like an offshore environment or something like that, and you know that's the path you want to take, go ahead and get all your certifications that you need. So you need very specific certifications to work offshore. And sometimes they take a little bit of time to get. And I have done some hiring myself for offshore work. And that's like the main thing that we look for is people that already have that done. So that way we don't have to wait for them to do those certifications. So that's something that I would definitely recommend if you know that's a path you want to take.
Yes, depending on your age, if you aren't ready to get certifications yet, but you want to investigate and explore, getting involved in organizations that are hiring through Canada Summer Jobs and working at the mini aquarium or the aquarium over on in Bombay. Canada Fishing for Success hires through Canada Summer Jobs. Compass, which is the Marine Professionals Organization, they may have a program that they're hiring through again this year. So, try to really do a deep dive into summer employment so that you can sort of use that time to do some smorgasbord kind of testing during your summers, or if you have work terms, and then go from there. And as Jennifer mentioned, starting your certification. So even doing something simple like getting your PCOC, which is your personal certification for boating, would help, so that you just get an idea if even this is something that you're interested in. But even when you think about what Jennifer's doing, like she's not actually fishing, she's in the science part of it, which is very different from fishing. So even though I showed you Fishing for Success, which is an educational component piece or social justice component piece, I also work as crew on a fishing boat, which is very different. And that's what Jennifer's talking about too, where you have to get the industry classes and you go to Marine Institute and you work towards your Fishing Masters 4. And so to get your 2 basic courses to actually get on the boat, you could start at go and talk to the Professional Fish Harvester Certification Board and ask them to say, what do I need to be a crew person, and get your basics. And then the interesting thing about fish, if you actually want to fish, the best thing to do is like have a father or a mother who fishes. And honestly, it's like one of those inroads, like a mafia thing. You're related to someone, it's so much easier. But don't let that put you off from it, because fishermen today are getting older and they need to sell their licenses, and they're looking for young people who are interested and want to fish. And so if you show a strong interest in it, and this is something you want to do, like don't let it set you aside from it. Get determined and set out to do it. So we need people who fish, and we need people who are interested in it for their communities, and as a food source and in a sustainable way, as Jennifer herself is interested in the research of that. And so but I do have to say that, and I'm interested in hearing Jennifer's read on this, like what kind of things she, especially when she mentioned that she was a monitor, you know, there are things that I'd love to see some advances made on just the space of fishing, even the gear for women, you know, smaller glove sizes. You know, I'm 5 foot tall. Do you know how hard it is for me to get fishing gear that fits? You know, when you talk about those Gumby suits, like, you know, do you know what my Gumby suit looked like for me? You know, when I was training at MI, it was like, you know, yeah, so it's, you know, so thinking about that and being aware that you're entering into this space and just be ready for it. Like, just get your, you know, search out with other women who are going to support you in this, so that you've got your tribe, so to speak, and there will be men who will support you in it, but also just be aware that you know, I did walk into a classroom in MI that had boobies drawn on the board, so I'm just going to say, and it wasn't that long ago, because I'm a retread. You know, I was as I said, I was teaching high school science, so you know, it's still there. It's still a guy's thing. So yeah.
Well, I think too, yeah, the importance of putting yourself out there, connecting with organizations, connecting with groups, connecting with your people, making sure that you're, you know, asking those questions and saying, like, can we have a coffee? Can we chat about, you know, what you do with your organization, or what are some new trends in the industry? Because unless you get out there and put yourself out there, you may not get that information. So that's a really good point. And I think you touched on, you know, that it's an evolving career, the fishery is evolving. So what would you say are some specific roles or trends that are in high demand in the fishery?
Well, I think Stephanie, you mentioned before we
Mm-hmm.
were in the backstage, we were talking about someone who's doing research in erosion, you know,
Mm-hmm.
landscape erosion, and
Yeah, coastal erosion. Yeah.
right? And so that's, you know, that's extremely fisheries related, because many of the young lobster and the young cod, you know, depend on the coastal structure. It's so, you know, what's happening when coastal erosion and damage occurs, where the young lobster harboring, where the young tomcod harboring. And so we really need to get a handle on that. So you don't necessarily have to fish to be involved in fishing. It's
Right.
just if you're interested in it, like, go at it. And again, I'm talking from my teacher, getting young people to get interested in going out on the ocean, because if we're going to be talking about climate change and dealing with climate change and getting young people to get their head around that, like, I want to get every young person out on the water, and then where they go with it from there is up to them. And so, you know, I just, and we live in Newfoundland and Labrador, and that, talking about who our sea people are in this province anymore. We have, you know, young people living in St. John's and they've never been in a boat. We do casual hands in the air survey when we bring Choices for Youth and YMCA kids out, and we ask, you know, of you in the boat here, how many of you, if this is your first trip? And for most of them, this is their first boat trip. And I just feel like in Newfoundland and Labrador, that should not be the case. Yeah. And so what about marine transportation? I think Jennifer probably is aware of it in all of her studies, that's like a hidden profession. If you go shopping and you look at go to Costco and look at where things come from around the world, like, how is it getting here? It's marine transportation.
Yeah.
We really need more workers in that field too. So just from that viewpoint, we need to get more kids in the boat, and where we go from there and where they choose to go with it is a win-win for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I think being in like the science side of things, there's definitely a place for more people. It's really hard to get people that are willing to do field work, especially in the academic field. So a lot of people do their education, they come out with degrees, and maybe they've never been in a boat before and they've never fished, they've never actually had that practical experience, and they're scared of it or they don't want to. Or you have the people that, you know, fished their whole lives but then didn't go and do the education. So I think that balance, and having people that have the practical hands-on experience, know about the culture, know about the communities, are invested in that way, but then also get their education, and to be able to be in those high-level spaces is really important. And I've definitely noticed demand for that. There's tons of jobs. I mean, I've done work for oil and gas companies that has nothing to do with fisheries, but they have environmental regulations that they have to meet. Same with transportation, same with a lot of those industries. They have environmental guidelines and things that they have to meet, and they have to put together a team to do that. And it's really important to have people on those teams that are actually really knowledgeable and care and have a sense of actual like caring about the environment, caring about the ocean, caring about the fish and the culture that comes along with it. So I think there's definitely a demand for that in the industry right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all connected, you know, when you talk
Very
about
much.
it's all connected. We do have a question in the chat. This is for Kimberly. Was it hard to get school administrators on board for experiential learning? And were teachers nervous at the lack of their knowledge? That's an interesting one. Did the schools that agreed to join already have fisheries and oceans knowledge? So I guess we'll go back to the first part. Was it hard to get school administrators on board for the experiential learning part?
That's always a challenge, because you have that, you know, there's still some cost. As much as we try to bring the cost down for schools, there's still some cost we have to you know, to request from the schools when they come out. There's a Farm to Cafeteria Canada grant that schools can apply for that will help them. We will help them fill out the paperwork so that we can bring the cost down even further. So getting school administrators on board, the biggest part with getting school administrators on board, as we know, is the bus, right? That's going to be the thing with the bus. So when we get the school administrators on board with the bus, then we're like halfway there, because we can show where the curriculum outcomes are. You know, if we're talking about a nutrition class, we can show those outcomes. If we're talking about science class, oh yeah, Jennifer knows, we can show those all day long. If we're in the 8th grade, we can connect that to, you know, the NL, was it social studies? And then in high school, they do they do NL studies in high school, and then I always get them mixed up, sorry, because I'm not in the classroom with them. But 8th grade and 11th grade, they both do an NL history or NL social studies, so you can link it there. But there's so many places where we can link it, and then of course climate change. And we can link it to the curriculum outcomes, and I can pull the specific ones when the teachers need them. So that's not the issue. It really comes down to bus and some funding.
Right.
All right. So were the teachers nervous at their lack of knowledge? Yeah, I mean, some teachers were, sure. And we've had teachers who haven't been in the boat themselves too. So Becky Windsor talks to that, and she's great. She was on CBC The Signal, and her students were on that. And I could actually, I don't know that I've got the link handy right now, but I can email that to you. I did put the link to the Girls Who Fish video in the chat just now, but I can email you the link to Becky Windsor's interview and her students about going out on the fishing trip. So yeah, I mean, they're a little bit nervous about it, but then they also look at it as a bit of fun, learning along with their students. And they do mention, and coming back to, you know, the part where, remember when we went on the field trip to Fishing for Success? And they can do that for months, they say, because, you know, when you're outside, you have all senses engaged. You smell the air, the boat's moving, you're cold, you're wet. Now somebody's seasick, and that's hilarious. Like, we're talking about, you know, teenagers, right? Everybody pulls out their phone, you know, and then they're like, did you get that on tape? Even the kid who's seasick, did you get me? Did you get a picture? And you know, so like, it's the best thing ever. And so it's every sense is engaged. So it's like hyper learning. It's not in a book where you're sitting in this, you know, this warm room with these white walls. So they remember details. much better. They come back on the boat and they're just so excited. And then Leo starts with his filleting show, which is just a riot. You know, he's doing this wicked filleting. And then he's telling his traditional stories, and then he's doing his gory stuff because he's like a 7-year-old at heart. And it's just a lot of fun. Then we cook up lunch for everybody from the fish they just caught. And then I'm throwing in the sciencey stuff, you know, trying to keep it real too. And it's just this full rounded experience. So, you know, trying to pick out fisheries knowledge in the school curriculum is a bit tangly because of the way that curriculum is set up. It's all broken up into pieces across the grade level. And there is no marine biology course or oceanography course. It's interesting that at one time I had taught in Florida, and I actually taught a marine biology course, and that's why I was able to sponsor a deep sea fishing and a scuba diving after school club, because we had a marine biology course. But you can pick those pieces out, and it's really vital to do that now because, you know, over 70% of the planet is covered in water, and climate change is the biggest challenge facing us now. And we're talking about, you know, Newfoundland and Labrador that has this biggest coastline, and we're talking about the blue economy is the biggest thing that DFO is pushing at us, or that the Canadian government really is pushing at us. And it could be the biggest employer of Newfoundland and Labrador, not just as a single overhead umbrella thing, but you look at tourism or recreation, or, you know, the work that Jennifer's doing. When you start pulling all these other side industries in besides exports and food and restaurant and everything else, it starts to become even bigger than oil and gas. So, like, let's not sell it short. Let's get more people in the boat.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the importance of going outside the four walls of the classroom and getting out for those experiential opportunities, because those are, you're right, those indelible moments are what stick with people and push them into these careers. Are you surprised by the level of knowledge of fisheries and oceans? Sort of, when you have participants, are you surprised by their level of knowledge in the fishery or in oceans?
I mean, when we have young people come out, yeah, it's interesting. You have, you know, when we have school groups come out, because we have 30 kids will come out. So you can't take 30 kids in a 26-foot sea breeze boat. And we wouldn't want to take 30 kids out at one time because they're not going to get a hands-on personal experience. So we break up the groups, the big group, into smaller groups, and we rotate them through. So everybody has a hands-on experience. So one group is doing a rope work, another group is going fishing, and another group is doing art. They all have at least one item they're going to bring home, and they rotate through these 3 groups. And you know, each kid has something that sticks with them. Like one girl, for example, the rope work was her thing, and she just kept weaving rope. And you know, someone else, it was the artwork. And so, you know, it just depends. And then you get people who come with this wealth of knowledge because they went fishing with grandpa and they've always loved to fish. And so you know, they just half the time take over the show. And it's so, and then you have the other extreme where there are kids who have never gone fishing and they're terrified to climb down over the 10-foot stage head. And you tell them it's okay to be cautious, because that's telling you to be careful. Careful's a good thing. So watch all your friends go first, and they're going to live, and then you then you go next, and it's right. Good, right? So I noticed there's some question in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I think that was the one that we got. I did have another question. You already touched on it a little bit about the gear that often doesn't fit for women when you're in the industry. So I just wanted to hear from both of you. Like, can you highlight any specific challenges that women might face, and ways that you can address them? Like, what have you experienced, and what's your advice for how to deal with those situations?
Yeah, the gear is a big one. So the majority of gear is made for men. So it's usually made for taller people, made for a little bit bigger people. I've personally had a lot of difficulties getting gear that fit. I recently needed a new pair of coveralls and I had to go to, I think it was 6 different stores until I finally got a pair. But yeah, I think making sure that whatever, if you're going out and you're buying your own gear or if a company is supplying the gear, really advocating for yourself, making sure that your gear fits because it is a safety concern. So if you have gear that's too long or gear that's too big, like gloves that are too big, it's very hard to work in. So you do always want to put safety first. So I would make sure that whatever you're doing, whether you're buying the gear yourself or you are getting it provided to you, that it does fit. And if it doesn't, like, speak up for yourself and say, these gloves are 2 sizes too big. I really need a smaller pair. There is some things that are unavoidable. So like Kimberly mentioned as well, those survival suits or Gumby suits, however you want to call them, they're either one size fits all, or they do come in smaller sizes, but it's so rare that there's someone that needs them on a vessel, they're not available. So like that photo of me wearing mine, when I walked in it, I had to hold up the legs because they were way too big. And all the guys were laughing at me walking across the deck, holding my little legs up so I could walk. But I had to do it. I needed to be able to move in it. So there's some stuff like that that's unavoidable. Hopefully with time it'll change. But as of right now, you just do it. You do have to be a little bit prepared that not everything is going to be made for someone a little bit smaller in the industry. Yeah, it's a little unfortunate, but I do think with like more women in the industry, it's going to become standardized that there does have to be things that will fit. There's a couple of brands out there now that are making coveralls and things like that for women. So that's great as well. And some stuff does come in women's sizing now. So it's getting a little bit better, even in the few years that I've noticed.
What about you, Kimberly?
Oh yeah, she said she covered it all. So I'm on a open boat, and so sometimes there's restroom problems. So I've so that's always interesting. But those are workarounds that you have to be ready for. So it's just to be aware of them. It's nothing that you probably haven't had to work around when you've gone camping with a group of friends. So those are just things to be aware of.
Right. Okay. We do have a question. What areas are the girls who fish? Oh, sorry. What areas are the girls who fish program? Where are they offered? What towns, for example? So, and are you looking to expand?
Yeah, so Girls Who Fish is offered by, it's a Fishing for Success program. And so currently we're only in Petty Harbour. So it's interesting, we're called Girls Who Fish Canada, and Yinji Lee, a professor at Tokai University in Japan, gave us the name Canada after it. Yinji Lee she heard me speak at a conference in Thailand about the Girls Who Fish program that we had started, and I didn't recognize her at the time, but she came to Mun University for a postdoc, and then she and her daughter joined Girls Who Fish, and I didn't even recognize her having been at the Thailand conference. And she was at Girls Who Fish. So and then about a year later, 2 years later, when she returned to Japan, she contacted me and said, "Oh, I want to start a Girls Who Fish at Tokai University." And I was like, "What? I thought you were here in like," and I was like, "Oh, I felt really stupid then." But so she started Girls Who Fish Japan, and we had a launch, and it was pretty exciting. And then myself and the artist in residence, Kelly Jane Bruton, we went to Japan and visited with the Girls Who Fish Japan. So yeah, we have Girls Who Fish Japan, but I don't think that's what we're being asked about. But how exciting is that, right? That
That's incredible.
Program is in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a common issue shared by women around the world. Women fish, but the most common way that they fish is by gleaning, collecting fish from the shore within, say, water that's like knee deep, where they can bring their children with them. And so actually talking about how we get women in the boat is a different thing altogether, and empowering women to do that. And Japan is a very highly male dominated culture. And so how do we spread this program? I'd love to have it in every community across Newfoundland and Labrador. That'd be exciting, wouldn't it?
Well, maybe it'll keep growing. I mean, I think it's going to keep growing, and the more we get out there, the bigger it'll get. So to hear that it's happening in Japan, that's fantastic.
Right?
Yeah.
How cool is that? So check out Girls Who Fish Japan. They've got Facebook social pages and everything.
Jennifer, we did have a question for you. How did you go about getting the fisheries observer job? Was it a summer job or during the school year?
So it wasn't a summer job, so it is a full-time job. It's through an organization called Sea Watch. So they do it all. They're the only organization that does it in the province. So DFO actually contracts them. So they're like a private contractor. So you would have to work for them if you wanted to be a fisheries observer, but they do their hiring once a year. So they usually hire a bunch of people around January, February. And then the training for that is a month-long training, full-time, 9 to 5. So you do in-classroom training. You then have a week to go and do your MED DBS, which is like a medical training that you have to be able to work offshore. Then you get your marine medical, which just certifies that you are fit and healthy to go offshore. And then you also have to do a couple exams. You have to write a written exam. You have to do an accuracy test, which is based on measuring snow crab. And you also have to do a field test as well. So that's in the Marine Institute in their lab, and it's just based on identifying different organisms. So they hire basically in like the beginning of the year, and then you do 1 month of training, and then you're good to work. And then the work is usually however much you want to work, you can. So if there is a job that comes up and you don't want to go because you want to have a week off, you can say, no, I'm not going to take that one. Or you can work pretty much constantly up until the season ends, which is usually September and October. So it is a full-time job. It starts kind of the end of the school year, but then it does kind of end around September. So it could be doable for a student. I was able to do it as a student because I was in my last year. And it was actually COVID time. So all my classes ended up being online for the last few months. And so I was able to do the full-time training while my classes were online. But other than that, you would kind of have to be available. So it's not technically a student job. It's not technically a summer job, just because it does start before that, but they don't do it over the winter.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And thank you for that question. And I think you've really opened us up to learning about new careers and opportunities and how we can get there. Thank you for your questions, everyone. And I think Jennifer and Kimberly have both put their contact information in the chat. And they also, Kimberly provided a link to a video that's really fantastic to show the Fishing for Success program. We'd love to hear about your experience at today's event. So you can scan a QR code, and that'll take you to a short survey that we'll also put in the link in the chat. We'll also be sending the survey through email after the event if you can't complete it right now. So there it is, if you want to scan that. So again, Kimberly and Jennifer, we'd like to thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. I'm sure that you're going to have a lot of people contacting you in the future to learn more about the programs and your experience. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for attending the Fisheries Career Connections today, and have a wonderful day.